discussion of how we see things coming from the investment point of view. So I have a great panel to introduce today, where we have people that understand clearly how investment funds work, to see how to really get money going to make things happen, from pension funds, from family office, and investment funds. So it's my pleasure to say that today we'll have Eder Costa, Guilherme Gazzoni, Santiago Chico, and Hernando Guzmán. So we'll have a first round of discussion, asking them to introduce themselves, let them know what they really do, which is quite interesting, and also to hear from them their first impression of what they just heard in the panel that was organized and coordinated by Margareta. So I'll ask first Eder to start with us and share with us what he does and how he sees the investment arena after what we heard in the previous panel. Eder, please, you're now in charge of the next discussion, and we'll love to hear what you have to say. So thanks.
Thanks, Héctor, Margarita, and all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm delighted. So let me go further. I work in the private pensions industry in Brazil as a professional board member, and I'm here today because pension funds are institutional investors always looking for investment opportunities. In a glance, looking at the pension industry in Latin America, we have around $900 billion in assets under management in figures at end of 2020, okay? And these assets are projected to be $1.4 trillion by 2023. So, you know, it's a huge amount of money. In Brazil, the assets under management of pension funds are roughly around $256 billion, okay? And so it's a lot of money we have in the pension industry in the region. In order to understand why companies on the longevity industry might be a good opportunity to pension funds to invest, we need to understand the challenges that we are facing in the institutional investors today. Okay, so first one is that we have a sub-zero interest rates trend. Okay, there's a working paper from Bank of England. It was published back in January 2020. It shows an 8th century of global decline in real interest rates from 1311 to 2018. So despite the hiccup we have in real rates, we are seeing many countries today as the inflation is catching up in the post-pandemic, times. The study suggests that the low interest rates are here to stay. So this means that pension funds need to go shop for better returns on the investments of its reserves, right? And another aspect that it's very important to have in mind is that the business environment is very volatile nowadays. There is a report from Bank of America, global research team, entitled "To the Moonshots: Future Tech Primer." It was issued last September, and it shows what I mean by volatility in the business environment. The report mentions that the pace of change is accelerating. In 1958, we had an average company lasting for 61 years on the S&P 500 index. By 2016, this time was on average 24 years, and forecast points to just 12 years by 2027. So this means companies are coming and going very fast. So it's important for pension funds, for investors overall, to identify opportunities in its early stage, right? So imagine investing in the internet before the dot-com boom, right? It was great. So the failure to identify future opportunities today could mean missing out the next big revolution tomorrow. So we have to understand that and consider that the longevity industry is a very promising, area to invest. Okay, and finally, to conclude, why longevity investments is sexy, right? Innovation in health are among the radical technologies that could change our lives and accelerate the impact of global megatrends. The report that I was mentioning on from Bank of America, they highlighted 14 technologies that represent today around $30 billion in market size, and it's potentially projected to $6.4 trillion by 2030. From these 14 technologies, human tech-related technologies are 3, okay, like synthetic bionics, immortality, human bionics, and things like that. So that's very important to have in mind, that it's a good opportunity for pension funds to look at the longevity industry, and that's why we are here today with you guys. Okay, so I stop here with.
Thanks, Eder. I think it's really a great first intervention. I know you wrote this very interesting book about the revolution of the pension fund boardrooms, which is clearly one of the great things we have to keep on discussing to see how those pension funds see longevity, which is, as you said, it's crucial. I would love to hear now Guilherme Gazzoni, who's been working also now in raising a longevity fund. So tell us a little bit about that, and also your first impression of what you heard in the previous panel. Thanks, Guilherme.
Thank you, Héctor. It's great to be here discussing longevity and investment opportunities in this long-awaited summit. I think we were deserving a forum to discuss what we are discussing today. And, well, I'm the founder of Kuarup Capital. So Kuarup is a search fund. For those familiar to the model, for those not familiar to the model, I'll give a brief explanation. But a search fund basically seeks to acquire a mid-sized company. And in this case, Kuarup is the first search fund focused on longevity. What does that mean? It means that the company that we'll be acquiring will benefit somehow from the longevity megatrend. So let me divide this into two pieces. One, first, what is actually a search fund? So a search fund is a structure formed by a group of investors, usually 10 to 12 investors, and one or two searchers, and I'm the searcher of Kuarup Capital. Together, we are scanning the market, looking for firms that have a solid case for acquisition. Usually, that's what all search fund does. And what they take into consideration is one of the main aspects of acquisition is, why is this firm being sold? And if the firm is under succession, or if the owner is willing to retire, or for some reason focusing on a new venture, then it makes sense for a search fund. And therefore, you already see that a search fund, any search fund, will directly connect to the longevity trend and to everything that we heard Matt, Greg, Jan, Doubt talking about in the former panel. Because as people live longer and as they have more expectations for their lives, they are changing business. And just as Eder pointed out, businesses are changing hands, are having shorter cycles. So that's the case for a search fund. What exactly I'm looking for? What does a longevity-focused search fund means? So it means that given that people are living longer, given that people are only in Brazil, if you take Brazil in consideration, you are adding 7 million more senior people to our population. That's a 20% increase in only 10 years. Given that you have in this decade the first vintage of Generation X's arriving at what was once called the retirement age, but these people are not retiring. They are willing to reskill. They are willing to change their careers for good. So they are doing something different. And given that even younger people are more and more aware of the needs to save and to protect their future, all of those put together are trends that will change industries like health, like finance, like insurance, like education, you name it, dramatically. So our mandate with Kuarup is wide enough to allow for a target or a solid case of a company that benefits from this tailwind. So that's the case for Kuarup Capital. Just a final point here in this introduction, everything that we saw before in the panel, everything that we are seeing in terms of changes for our health, for our longer living, all of this is meaningful, and all of these are triggers for what I'm doing here. So what I'm trying to do is what we are building with Kuarup Capital is a clear case of acquisition of a company that can bring new products and new services related to longevity in the Brazilian market.
So thanks a lot, Guilherme, for your introduction. It's clear that people willing to invest should look into a search fund or an investment fund to try to look into those arenas. If they're interested in longevity, I think this is a good discussion to have. One of the things that we were discussing, Margareta, Chris, and myself, when we were building this panel discussion, it's let's see how longevity is looking. What are the key trends? And that's a little bit what we saw. And then how do we accelerate those things in LATAM? And also having this panel here with that vision of pension funds, search fund, investment fund, and family office should give us a view or how we can jump in and try to invest and then accelerate the longevity discussion within Latin America. So I will ask now Hernando Guzmán, who runs also an investment fund that specializes or has been over the last few years specialized in healthcare and looking for new technologies, to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about what he's doing, and also what's your first impression when you look at the panel we heard before and we looked into a few minutes ago. So please, Hernando.
Thank you, Héctor, Margareta, Cristobal. Thank you very much for the invitation. Very happy to be here with all of you. So yeah, so at XB Ventures, we run a cross-border venture capital fund. The way that we like to tell about ourselves is that we're a traditional, non-traditional venture capital fund. The traditional element of it is that we invest in startups. We're focusing on healthcare startups, like any other venture capital, institutional venture capital fund will do. The non-traditional element is that we are Mexicans, we're based in Mexico, but as a matter of fact, we're looking to invest in startups from the US, Europe, Israel, and we're looking into Asia too. So we are more focused into startups from outside of the Latin American region. There's a specific reason for that. I don't want to enter into the details right now, but this puts us in a very interesting opportunity and way to be out there looking into all this amazing technology and into all this, the future, the Star Trek technology, as I like to call it, that is going to be in our daily lives in the near future and in the mid future, right? So as you mentioned, Héctor, we have been focusing doing healthcare investments over the last years. We're very happy with this focus that we have been doing it, and we have a dedicated investment fund that is focusing into this. On the other hand, we are very aware of longevity, right? We love it. We're looking into a lot of companies. And the way that we're looking into this kind of our fund structure and fund strategy is that we kind of see it as a sandwich, right? On one side, we're looking into all the health tech that is out there, which at the end, and we are seeing longevity kind of as this sandwich, top-down, bottom-up approach, where health tech and the technology of health tech, it is having an impact on longevity at the end. We're not coming into molecules, and we're not coming into CRISPR or RNA, genetic modifications that will let us have this huge leap impact into suddenly increasing 10 years, 15 years, 20 years into the life of people, which at the end is how we also see the impact of longevity technology, but also is starting to close the gap. And on the other side, we're seeing longevity as this future of what health is going to be, this leap impact into the really having these 10, 15, 20 more years into human life. And the way that we're doing that, to finish this introduction as investor, and now we go to the second question about the previous panel, is we are having a fund focused on healthcare, investing in that, and then looking into structuring right now another fund into looking into longevity. Quite two different investment strategies, and I think this is relevant for someone that is interested in this, because we also believe that timing on how startups and how companies are going to be performing is very different. On one side, you have healthcare, health tech companies that are looking more kind of like any technology company with investment periods shortened in time, 5, 6, 7 years in some cases, depending on the stage that you're investing in these companies. And then longevity, we're looking at more kind of like a mid-term investment opportunity, probably 12, 15 years, right? And that is okay. That is no criticism at all. And that is what the some of the sector is going to be needing in order to create all this. And that is perfectly fine. This has been done in the past in many other industries, so we're very happy with that. So that's how we're tackling this as terms of a fund, how we're doing it, seeing a lot of innovations in the US, in Israel, and some in Europe. So we're very happy with everything that we're looking at. Which brings me, to your second question about the previous panel, right? So I think the previous panel, an amazing technology. Have one of my partners that was on the call. He just sent a message saying one was better than the other one, right? So they're just great. They're just amazing what they're doing, and that's what we're looking out there. That's what we're seeing out there. I think it was an amazing job in bringing a good example where we're looking in the market in terms of technology and in terms of the type of companies that are revolutionizing this. As I said, and as you could mention, you know, a lot of these technologies are in FDA trials. They are starting. They are focusing on that. And that is what it has to be done. We are expecting and we are seeing these technologies that are definitely going to bring these 10, 15, 20 years into our lives. I will probably stop here. I would just add another element, which is we're also seeing a lot of interest in terms of how is this going to impact us as people. And this is also something as investors, as you know, also focus on the social impact element of our investments. How is this going to matter, right? Because once you start increasing the life of people by 10, 15, 20 years, what is that impact going to have in terms of societies? What is that impact going to have in terms of economics? How is that going to have an impact even in terms of religion, right? So at the end, all this is important because it's going to have an impact out there, and it just starts making part of all the decisions that we make as investors on where to invest, when to invest, in what type of companies. So I don't know if I leave it there, and then probably we can talk more in detail.
So thanks a lot, Hernando. I think it's quite clear what you were doing, and also at the end you brought again back a discussion that Eder was saying, how this really impacts the funds, the pension funds, and the money it's required to keep on things happening. So now I would like to hear Santiago Chico. Santiago, it's quite interesting. It's really a family office that's been investing constantly in healthcare, from medical devices, from services. I know Santiago from a long time ago. And when we discussed about bringing this panel, it was clear that Santiago had to be on the discussion. So thanks, Santiago. And we'd love to hear how you see this when you look into longevity as a family office, but also where you think it's going. So please share with us your first impression.
Thank you, Héctor, very much for inviting me. Very excited to be here with you all. First of all, as a family office, we're looking for opportunities to invest in the long run. We are long-term investors, different from many of the family office investors. We like to get very actively involved with the companies we invest in. So a few years ago, we started to look at the different sorts of industries that were available and what was happening to them. And we got very attracted to healthcare for a couple of reasons. One of them is, the increasing cost of healthcare. And when you take a look at countries like the United States that spend $1 in every $5 in healthcare, that's just impressive. And so that brought attention to us. The second piece was we've always been very interested in technology and the intersection of technology with industries. And specifically healthcare brought to our attention that there were incredible opportunities to take advantage of new technologies that are happening right now. Some of them were sensors and the capacity to buy sensors and measure data very cheaply. The second piece was the evolution of artificial intelligence and their capacity to look at data and correlate data automatically and very efficiently. Robotics and bionics were another piece that seemed to have a very interesting piece around it. And then I guess just data analytics and as a whole, the capacity to compute data at such affordable prices. All of those, plus the increased cost, made healthcare a very interesting opportunity for us to take a look at. And specifically, we decided to take a look at healthcare, thinking about two things. How we could have an incredible and interesting social impact by making the best sort of healthcare and offering it at affordable prices. And so we've been taking a look at it that way. And we think, obviously there's a tremendous trend around the world as technology evolves and as healthcare improves. People are living longer lives, but it's not only about living longer. It's about having a good quality of life as you increase that years in tens or 20 or 30 additional years of life. That it's just an incredible life that you live. And so this is what got us interested in the industry. And as you mentioned, we've been taking a look at it at different ways, from services, from device manufacturing, from drug development and different sort of things on technologies that we believe that can have an incredible impact in people's way of life and on access to healthcare.
So thanks a lot, Santiago. It was quite interesting also to see the view from a family office. I would like to come back to another round where I would like to hear Eder and the rest, Guilherme, Hernando, Santiago, how should we work in accelerating investment in longevity? We've seen where longevity is going from a global standpoint. Then we'll have a chance in the next panel that's coordinated by Santiago March to hear how things are going in Latin America. We'll hear examples from around the region, but I would like to hear from you guys. What should we do? What can we do to accelerate investment from the pension funds, from the search funds, from the personal investors, the family offices? So let me hear and start first with Eder to see what's your idea.
Great. Before jumping on that, I couldn't keep from commenting on Hernando's point on the impact on society as we live longer. You know, in Brazil, we like to look at the fun side of everything. And the other day I was hearing this guy talking about this impacts as we live longer. And he was saying, you know, marriage, the institution of marriage, when we used to live like life expectancy was age 50, we used to keep married for 30, 40 years. Now we are going to live until over 100, and we're going to be married for 70 years, 80 years. We need to rethink that, right? So everything is going to be impacted, right? So let me look at how things are in Latin America today in the longevity investment side and how we could accelerate that. Okay, so there are mainly two sources of investments for longevity. I would say A would be venture capital and private equity fund, as we are hearing, you know, our folks here talking about. And main focus from venture capital and private equity is financing startups and non-listed companies, okay? In Brazil, if we look at some numbers from the Brazilian Association of Venture Capital and Private Equity, looking at 2020, we had a total of $4.5 billion invested in 255 companies. So money went from venture capital to 200 of those companies, and from private equity funds went to 55 companies. Health tech represented 11% of that investments or of the money invested, right? And age tech represented only 3%. So a total of 15% of the venture capital and private equity funds money went to health tech and age tech and, let's say, longevity industry overall. Okay, so we have good money from these guys, but if you look at pension funds, institutional investors, you heard me on the first round, the numbers are huge, you know, $1.4 trillion in 2023. So it's a lot of money. And the thing is, we need to attract those guys and bring that money to investments in longevity, and pension funds are a lot more conservative, okay? They look longer term, they look at lower risk and everything. So the challenge here would be to attract pension funds having, let's say, bonds with longer time horizon, who knows, specialized stock exchange on longevity and things like that. We need to create this environment so that pension funds can jump on that. Another thing is that investments in biotech in Brazil, for instance, today compared to the US, you know, in the US, in the NASDAQ stock exchange, they had 117 biotech companies with market value over $1 billion. In Brazil, there are no such companies in the Brazilian stock exchange with that profile. Okay, we only have, you know, in the Brazilian stock exchange, which is named B3, we had 10 companies, only 10 companies on the traditional healthcare industry, focusing on hospitals, clinics, and diagnosis, things like that. And only 4 of those had market capitalization over $1 billion. So we have, you know, a lot of room to invest in longevity, because biotech listed companies is almost non-existent market in Brazil. We invest currently through ETF funds. For instance, you know, last July 2021, a financial institution in Brazil called XP, they launched an ETF mimicking an ETF in the US with 274 companies such as AstraZeneca, Moderna, and Pfizer BioNTech. So we are currently investing through ETF to other, you know, means, but not directly. Okay, and health tech companies are the most promising investment in the stock exchange, considering, you know, that in Brazil, the current population of elderly people is running around 30 million individuals, and this is projected to double by 2050 and to triple by 2060. Okay, so people are aging, and we have a lot of good opportunities there. And then to close...
Yes, please.
Okay, no, just to close, I would say that, you know, it's a very interesting environment, and we need to keep an eye on that. Thank you.
No. Thank you very much, Eder. I think that for Guilherme saying, how do we accelerate this? This is clear. I mean, having a search fund specialized in longevity, it's clear. But I would like to hear, you know, how's your first feeling now that you're going to the search fund and where you're at with it. And it's clear an example of how do we accelerate investment and longevity within the region.
Héctor, we are in the early stage of the opportunity. I mean, I think a common thread here is everyone sees all the impacts of longevity. We don't know exactly what will happen, but we know there are opportunities within biotech, within society, within the transformation of the way that we live, we consume. So that's clear, but the actual investment on those structures that can be meaningful for longevity are still in the very beginning. The big question is, how do we accelerate? And that's what you asked. And what I see right now is there are key things in Latam that sometimes, if you look in a global aspect, are challenges that we need to overcome. Some are in our control, some are not. So when we talk about longevity and when you talk about large sums of money coming in to fund these initiatives, which is something necessary, all these initiatives cost money. I think one of the things that we can't control, but we should have, is political stability, economic stability. As Eder already pointed out, low interest rates, global low interest rates is one trigger for investments in alternative assets, just like the ones that we are seeing. So it unlocks capital for VCs, it unlocks capital for search funds, for private equity. Those things are not directly in our control, but they are challenges when talking about longevity and developing this market in Latam. What is in our control, and I believe that this forum is a great example of that. We can bring awareness, we can show how large, how big is the opportunity, and we can be very clear, very specific on using research, using the power of connection, dividing this opportunity into pieces. So we spoke about biotech in the session before, which is great. But if you look on a daily basis, let's take the silver economy, for example. So the silver economy is everything, services and products related to the people that are on their 50s, on their 60s and over. This is a market that only in Brazil represents 25% of the national consumption. While there are only 15, 16% of the population in this cohort, it consumes 1/4 of all GDP. Half of these people are willing to pay more for a better product or service, so they value quality. And they say it's difficult to find products to fit what they want. 45% are saying that they can't find their products, they can't find the service that they want. So if you go on a daily basis, if you look at the ordinary shops, if you look at the local economy, getting out of biotech, but looking at our day-to-day on what we consume, there are many investment opportunities. If we are able to put together education, to get people knowing how to manage business, technology to accelerate this business, if we are able to bring in investment through awareness, through research, showing how these opportunities can grow and how big they will be. And of course, we have to strive for political stability, for economic stability in our region, because that's crucial for long-term investments like the ones that we are discussing. All those things put together, I think we are ahead of an untapped market that still has a long way to go with many opportunities.
Thanks, Guilherme. Just for everyone that's looking at the transmission, we would love to hear also questions from your side. So feel free to put your questions on the YouTube channel, and then we'll make sure to get one or two up in the air. So Hernando, how are you seeing things? And quite interesting to see how we accelerate things. As also Guilherme is saying, you have examples of things that you're doing, raising money. Could you share a little bit of what you see from XBig Ventures, please?
Sure, definitely. And let me start saying that I agree 100% with what Eder and Guilherme has said. But let me just try to tackle this in a different way. And I think, like, how do we define let's start with the definition of longevity, right? Because if we only want to focus on these quantum leap type of companies that are there, we just saw them on the previous panel. Those are quantum leap companies. They're going to make a significant impact once these technologies start going to the market. They're going to have a significant impact. But talking specifically about Latin America, we have to be also very careful about that, because so right now there's a lot of countries, or many countries in the region, which we are staying behind in mortality rates, right? I mean, in age, in the average age of the population. There are some countries like Mexico, and I'm sad to mention this, where instead of keeping going up the curve, we're starting to go down, taking out COVID and the current situation. So the gap is starting to open more, right? When you have a Japan with an average, or a Hong Kong with an average age of over 82, 84 years old, and you have a Mexico with 74, 75, you have then other countries that are towards more than 60 years old, then the gap is starting already. It's already happening. Longevity is already happening in a certain way, not in a quantum leap way, but it's already happening. So we need to start closing that gap. And I know, Héctor, that you and Cristobal of FunSalud talk a lot about this and about closing the gap. And current technology that has a good impact in the short term can help closing that gap. So we start defining longevity as just living longer, as it is, without the quantum leap effect of 10, 20, 15, or 30 years. Then we need to invest more. We need to convince investors that we need to start investing in these companies that are bringing healthcare technology, health tech companies that are closing that. And as Eder just mentioned, we don't necessarily need to be focused on the CRISPR, biotech, molecular companies, because unfortunately, and I don't want to generalize at all here, but unfortunately, a lot of that research is not necessarily happening in our region. But we need the benefits of that, and we need to start closing that. So the first thing that I will say is, if we look at longevity as definition of just living longer in general, then we need to start closing the gap that we currently are starting to have with other more developed countries in the world. We need to start closing with technology. I think Santiago also pointed that. And then we just don't have to put all our weight for these quantum leap companies and quantum leap technologies, because history proves itself many times, right? So if history proves itself again, once these technologies out there, the pricing of these technologies is going to start very high, which is not necessarily we cannot just wait. Let me just give you an example. There is states in Mexico. There are states in many countries in Latin America for something as basic as they don't have inside diagnostic, blood diagnostic laboratories. What I'm meaning with this is that in order to do a plain and simple blood test, the blood has to travel over state borders, because there is no places where they can do it in sometimes in the public centers. And there are certain states like this. So if we're talking about something like basic like that, for example, we have invested in, a company that is going to bring a mini lab into retail, into all the doctor practices, that can start providing diagnostics, just to start then looking into, what is how to treat. If we want to start about Alzheimer, we just saw, Leucati with an amazing technology in how to do this. Well, we're also looking into technologies that can start monitoring and seeing if Alzheimer is going to start, 8 to 10 years before you start showing any symptoms. So as long as we start investing and convincing investors to look into this type of technologies, I think we're starting to do a very good job for our region. And from there, then we can also start looking into the quantum leap, as I call them, technologies, which is going to be the next step, and we're going to start seeing them, and we're already seeing them over the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
So thanks, Hernando, for this view. Santiago, I would like to hear from you. How do we really accelerate the development of longevity, but also bringing it into Latin America? doing things in Latin America, not only taking potentially money from LATAM and putting it into global, or should we consider it's only like putting money into global? How do we accelerate in bringing into Latin America?
Yeah, thank you, Héctor. I think that's a very interesting question. And for me, it requires a deep analysis on who pays for things and how decisions are made throughout Latin America versus other parts of the world, because there's a lot of solutions that are targeting different problems in bigger countries or with higher budgets for healthcare, but they have a very different dynamic in terms of the amount of money they can spend to solve stuff and who pays for that things. A country like Mexico or ours there's a big percentages of self-pay, versus other countries that have much more democratic access to medicine, like Canada, where most of it is paid by the government. And so I think when you take those different payers, it's just very interesting to focus on those technologies that can be affordable and can be deployed and can be access for that. And so I think what Hernando and Guilherme are doing is very interesting, because as it was mentioned by everybody here, there's an incredible amount of technologies, different technologies in gene researching, in devices, in sensors, in artificial intelligence, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think selecting those and changing the business model, for example, it can be the same technology, the same equipment. We've been talking a lot about this ultrasound machine that's very affordable. Potentially in the United States, it can be acquired by the end patient and use it. Potentially that needs to change and be a different business model in Mexico, for example, where we have to rent it out per day, and so a company buys it and then rents it out. And so just changing the business model and having people like Guilherme and Hernando that have the local knowledge and local understanding on how that decision made is, how those decisions are made, who makes the decisions, what's affordable and what's not affordable, and using those same technologies but applying them in different ways, I think is one of the key factors that are going to allow us to take advantage of those wonderful technologies that are being developed and really have an impact in our countries.
Thank you very much, Santiago. Just as the way, we have two questions that I would like to hear you very quickly. We're 10 minutes to go, but I would like to hear a little bit of how you feeling about robotics. Robotics should be applied into longevity. What's the role of robotics into longevity? And specifically for Santiago, Guilherme, and Hernando, if you're specifically looking into something that has to do with robotics and longevity. You want to start, Guilherme?
Of course, Héctor. It is part of our target. The problem is what a search fund does usually is to take a company that already exists and has a proven business model on what they are doing for a long time. So we have very few targets that are tapping into the robotics opportunity right now. So it's a great opportunity. I would love to know more about this, but I'm afraid there are not enough targets to analyze, scan, and fit into this search fund model. Having said that, I'm just a search fund. It's definitely a key for longevity, and it's definitely a trigger for what we are discussing today. So it is in the scope of longevity.
Thanks, Guilherme. Hernando, are you seeing something? And also, I would add up to the list now, if there's something in IT tools, in IT, in data science that you think you're looking into longevity. And then I'll turn the same question to Santiago, and then for closing to Eder. Robotics and IT and data science within longevity.
So definitely, and I mean, in robotics, I think it's a little bit more tricky. Something that we have been seeing a lot is a combination between robotics, virtual reality, and artificial intelligence. Right, we're coming to that point where it's starting to mix, where you can start having, the impact and the use, more kind of like the future of telemedicine, where you can do surgeries through virtual reality but using robots. So it's, I think we're getting into that point. We're seeing some interesting technologies there. Again, depending on the definition into how we define longevity, well, it can have access, to provide access in areas where it is harder to have a specialist. Then it will have an impact in the broader sense of longevity. In terms of your other questions, I think it was Jean Herbert on the previous panel that mentioned something about implants. For example, we're looking into a company that has developed right now an organ transplant. I think on average can take somewhere around 8 hours, 8 to 6 hours before it has to be implanted into the receiver. We're looking into a company that has been able to push that to 72 hours. So it's a game changer, right? Like right now, you cannot talk about transplanting an organ from San Diego to New York because it's just not possible. And now you're suddenly being able to start talking about transplanting an organ around the world. You can bring them from anywhere to everywhere. So it starts changing a lot of the equation. So we're looking into artificial intelligence, into helping do, as the previous panel mentioned, into doing analysis of different parts of the body and pathologies. And so yeah, there's a lot that we are seeing around that. We can have 3 hours just to talk about.
No, thanks, Hernando. And we have 5 minutes more to go. I'll let everybody, I think you should stay tuned because also the next panel is great. It's about how the things are being seen in different countries in Latin America regarding longevity, and that will be moderated by Santiago March. Now I'll give Santiago Chico, another Santiago, the option to say, Santiago, so robotics and IT and data science for longevity, yes, no? Are you seeing something specifically?
Yeah, I think it's very exciting. For example, for me, in terms of robotics, I think it's very exciting to support the elderly in their ability to move and have independence. I think that plays a big role in improving your quality of life, being able to move around and do things on your own. And so I think exoskeletons, for example, to support elderly people to do things and to be on their own, I think is very, very interesting. The development of new organs and limbs through 3D printing right now, that they can do 3D printing with tissues and all of that, I think is just extremely interesting because of the affordability, because of the ability to design that to fit specifically a person. I think it's just very interesting. I mean, you see now, people that unfortunately have some sort of disability or whatever for some trauma or whatever, and now have these superpower bionics and they can do more things than us. And so I was in a conference the other day where there was a woman showing us her hand, and she unfortunately had cut it off, but she could do so many more things than I could do with my original hand with these bionics. That it was really interesting how she was like proud of it on things that she could do. And around IT and artificial intelligence, I see the same thing. I see for us, it's applying it to preventative healthcare and to healthcare or reducing the cost to have access to different things. And so we believe that through artificial intelligence and those sort of technologies, we can certainly detect things earlier so that it costs less to be healthy and stay healthy.
Thank you. So I would like to hear Eder's point of view. You started being the first in the panel to discuss. Now you're the one closing. So happy to hear you.
Thank you. Well, I will close just remembering that we are in the middle of a social revolution with technology enabling everyone to access information and make investments that used to be limited to only very wealthy people. So we see now people, regular citizens, talking on social media, discussing investments in stocks, through chats and community groups in the net. We see young people trading in mobile platforms like Robinhood or accessing Amazon to buy only one stock. And this is something even bigger than the crypto revolution. So we need to keep that in mind. And if one thing to accelerate interest in longevity investment, this would be to partner with digital economy community and its speed of light innovations. We have also to have that in mind because investments, the investment world is always also changing, right, as we speak. Okay, so I leave it there.
So thanks, Eder. It was great hearing all of you. We have the fortune that Cynthia was telling me I was running and there's a little bit more time, so that's even good. So I'll do one thing with the four of you. Just I'll ask you one more thing before wrapping up. While we were discussing the five of us, the panel, one of the things I was willing to understand from you is how do you select where to invest? And that's interesting. We've seen now very nice companies in the previous panel with a great job done by Margareta, all the work she does. And it was quite interesting. And if you have to invest in one or the other, when you look at the different options, and I understand it's a different view from a pension fund to search fund to a VC to a family office. So I would like to very quickly, 1 or 2 minutes from each side of you and say, what are the key things you look into? And I'll start by Santiago Chico to say, what are the key things you look when you invest into one company or the other?
So we basically, we look at a lot of things, but maybe I can summarize it in 3. One is, what is the path to profitability? And I think I made some reference to that in terms of, what is the market, what is the addressable market size, who has the power to make the decision, and who's the payer and where's the money coming from. And so understanding all those dynamics, I think, is very important for us to make the decision. The second one, specifically in longevity, is what is the impact on the quality of life and how is that going to change really the person's. And then the third piece would be, what is the stage of the technology or the solution, and what are the milestones, and how potentially we can impact in helping them improve to assure success and speed to market. And so if we believe we have zero ability to impact the company, potentially it wouldn't be an interesting investment for us, even though it can change the world or whatever. We try to be investors in things where we can actually help.
Perfect. I think it's clear your point of view, and also quite interesting how you do the analysis of where the money's coming from, who's paying, which is critical to really make things happen and really guarantee that the company is going to go forward. Guilherme, what's your impression? What's your point of view in that?
It's actually very similar to Santiago's. There are 2 whys and 1 what here. The first why is the business being sold? There are many reasons why a business can be sold. The best story is usually when someone has grown the business to be profitable, consistent, and might want to retire or want to someone could help to grow it to the next level. So that's the first why. The second why is it successful, and what's the impact that it brings to society? How can Kuarup add value? How can I, as the future manager of the business, or how can the group of investors add value? And finally, the third, and now it's a what, it's not a why, is what's the actual situation of the business? Finance, people, the people that are in business are made of people. So if the people are great, finance are great, if the price is right for an acquisition, basically it's a good business in a great industry that we are looking for.
Perfect. Thanks, Guilherme. Hernando, what do you look when you look into a company to invest? Where you put your money in, and what are key things you look into?
It's harder to comment at the last because everything was said, but yeah, all of the above. I would just say in order, it will be team for us first and foremost, is the most important. At the end, bad things are gonna happen in the process of the companies. It always does, and depending on the team, it is the direction that the company is gonna take. So team is the first and foremost. Obviously, the competition, it is important. At the stage that we are investing, we are coming a little more towards a Series A, Series B, which is it could be there's no later stage, but it's like growth stages. So competition is important. So we are really looking to see who is going to be the winner in a specific subsector, in a specific technology. So that is relevant. How is the market behaving? And then at the end is this is very particular also because we're an institutional investor. Is does the investment provide the timing and the returns that we're looking for our investors? At the end, we have that commitment, and we need to look at that, and that gives us a little bit less flexibility sometimes that it could be for family offices, for other type of investments. But at the end, being institutional investors, we need to make sure that in a certain amount of time we can provide the returns that we can do it, and that's why. Going back to how we started the fund, the structures of the fund and how we time invest, it matters, right? Because you cannot be doing for a fund that you want to invest in, and you want to close in 7 or 10 years. You cannot be investing in technology that's going to take 12 or 15 years to provide a success. So it does matter.
Thank you. Thanks a lot, Hernando. Eder, one question. When we look at this kind of things like longevity, and we think, for example, in the U.S., in who's going to pay for this? Insurance companies will be paying for this. When we look at the markets where really the insurance companies are the payers, do you foresee this being different in Latin America? When you think about the pension funds, how do you feel? Latin America is a market where there's a lot of out-of-pocket expenditure, and this might change. A little bit of what Santiago was saying when they do the assessment, who's going to pay for it? How do you foresee longevity, and who's going to be paying for it? It's the individual or the insurance companies? Who's going to pay for it?
Okay, well, if it was tough for Hernando, he didn't leave anything to me, okay, to speak, right? But certainly insurance companies and pension funds will have to tackle that, because where is the money is there, right? And it's going to be good investment opportunities. But rather than looking at what we look today, what we consider today as we invest in the pension funds world, I would say that what we will need to look in the very, very near future. And this is going to be, we will need to add to returns and risks on investments that we always consider while, looking for investments. But we are going to need to consider purpose and ESG aspects, because, pension funds are being pressured by the ESG aspects of every business they put money on. It needs to be sustainable. It needs to be environmental, friendly. It needs to be social friendly and everything. And this generation, Z and millennials, they are purpose oriented. So no business is going to have their money if you don't link purpose and things like that, their values to the investments that they do. So millennials and Gen Z are going to outnumber the combined generation of boomers and Gen X by 2025. They're going to be on top of organizations. They're going to be CEOs. They're going to be managing and deciding where to put the money. So we will have to consider those aspects of purpose and ESG aspects very, very soon.
So thanks to the four of you. I think it's been a very, very nice panel. I think it's clear that we're living an amazing time. I think we're in a time where there are too many things happening at the same time, too many technologies. I look into longevity, and this first approach where we're seeing it in Latin America and how to invest in it, it's been really great. So I would like to thank the four of you to this first discussion. I'm sure that you can work, guys, together. I'm sure that maybe, Eder, you could put money into Hernando's and Guilherme's investments. So let's see if they bring really longevity into Latin America. So those guys would be needing huge amounts of money from your side to make these things happen. And let's make sure that, as Santiago was saying, we look into bringing those models into Latin America, because the idea is let's invest and let's then bring it and adapt it into the Latin America so we can get all benefited of what Margareta was very, very good in sharing with us in the previous panel. So thanks a lot to the four of you. It's been a pleasure to moderate a great panel with you guys. Thanks as always with Chris for the vision of bringing this into Latin America. So great job done by AMIIF always. So we're very thankful to them for also including FunSalud in this. And Margareta, a pleasure, because it's been great discussing with you. And thanks also to all the AMIIF group, to Cynthia, who's done a great job in the team. And and stay tuned. The next panel is also going to be great. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.